Let me ask you something. When was the last time you said yes when you meant no? When was the last time you smiled just to smooth things over? When was the last time you held your tongue, not out of wisdom, but out of fear? These are not small acts. These are silent sacrifices, and they add up. You think you're doing it to keep the peace, to be kind, to be liked, but slowly, day by day, decision by decision, something inside you begins to wither. Let us speak now, not of pleasantries, but of truth. From the very beginning of our lives, we begin to mold ourselves based on what the world reflects back to us. We are sensitive to approval, to smiles, to applause, just as we are alert to frowns, disapproval, and emotional withdrawal. In this way, we begin to build what is called a persona, a mask we wear to navigate the expectations of society. It starts innocently enough. A child learns that being quiet makes adults happy. A teenager learns that suppressing their weirdness earns more friends. An employee learns that saying yes leads to promotions and praise. Over time, this mask becomes more polished, more automatic, more intricate. It becomes your social self, and eventually, many come to believe that it is their true self. But beneath the mask lies the real person, raw, complex, ever-changing. This person holds your deeper thoughts, your uncomfortable truths, your authentic voice. Yet the more we depend on the mask to receive validation, the more we bury the authentic self under layers of performance. This disconnection doesn't happen all at once. It's gradual. It happens in the thousands of small moments where you silence yourself to keep others comfortable, where you present what is likable instead of what is real. And slowly, what you present to the world becomes more refined, yet your inner world grows dim, neglected, and estranged. There's a quiet tragedy in becoming a person who no longer knows where the performance ends and the self begins. You wake up one day unsure of what you really want, what you truly believe, or what your own voice even sounds like. You've been trained to read the room, to shape, shift, to adapt to every person's expectations, but you've never learned to stay grounded in who you are beneath it all. This is the cost of living through the persona. It is not just psychological fatigue, it is soul erosion. The real danger lies in how rewarded the mask becomes. Society claps for your compliance. People admire your agreeableness. They say you're easy to be around, you're so nice, so reliable. You rarely cause conflict, but in reality, you have simply become practiced in swallowing your truth. And the better you are at pleasing others, the less likely they are to notice that you're quietly dying inside. Eventually, the mask begins to feel suffocating. You may begin to feel a constant anxiety, a strange emptiness, a sense of being surrounded by people yet feeling utterly alone. Why? Because no one truly knows you. They know the version you've allowed to exist, the curated, polished version, the mask, and love that is directed at a mask can never nourish the soul behind it. To reclaim your selfhood, you must first recognize the mask for what it is, a tool, not an identity. It is something you wear, not something you are. It may help you function in the world, but it must never replace your truth. The act of stepping out from behind the mask is terrifying, but it is also the beginning of freedom. Only by shedding the illusion can you return to yourself. Only by risking rejection can you be truly seen. And only by being truly seen can you begin to feel truly alive. There is a part of you that you've learned to keep hidden. A darker, more primal part that doesn't conform to politeness, harmony, or social approval. It is the part that holds your anger, your jealousy, your lust, your ambition, your defiance, your hunger for power, and your deep need for autonomy. These are the parts of yourself that were likely shamed, punished, or rejected when you were younger. So you buried them, you pushed them into the corners of your psyche where no one, not even you, could see them. But buried does not mean gone. These parts form what psychologists call the shadow, the unconscious reservoir of all that you've disowned in yourself. When you make a habit of pleasing others, of staying agreeable, of choosing harmony over honesty, you are constantly suppressing your shadow. You silence your anger to avoid conflict. You deny your ambition to avoid being seen as arrogant. You repress your sexuality so you can be accepted. You pretend to be selfless when, deep down, you crave recognition. The more you try to be good in the eyes of others, the more you push your raw humanity into the dark. And every time you do, your shadow grows stronger. But here's the truth: the shadow does not remain still. It does not sleep. It does not disappear because you've locked it away. It festers, it builds energy. And it finds ways to express itself, often in indirect, unhealthy, and unconscious forms. That sarcastic remark you made as a joke, that unexplained outburst at someone you care about, that quiet resentment you carry toward people who seem to take advantage of your kindness, that chronic anxiety that seems to come from nowhere, all of these are signs that your shadow is bleeding through the cracks. The problem is not that you have a shadow. Everyone does. The problem is that when you live to please others, you pretend you don't. You act as though you're only ever kind, only ever composed, only ever understanding. But this is a lie. A beautiful, socially rewarded lie, but a lie nonetheless, and lies, especially lies we tell ourselves, come at a cost. You begin to split inside. There's the version of you that everyone sees, calm, cheerful, easygoing. And then there's the version of you that you try to keep locked away, the version that's furious, tired of bending, and desperate to be real. Eventually, the split becomes too wide to maintain. You start to feel like a fraud. You may begin to sabotage your own happiness, lash out unexpectedly, or withdraw from relationships because you can no longer keep up the act. The more you suppress your shadow, the more power it gains, and the more power it gains, the more damage it can do when it breaks loose. But there is another path: integration. Instead of pretending that the darker parts of you don't exist, you begin to acknowledge them. You meet your shadow with curiosity instead of shame. You ask yourself, why am I angry? What do I truly want but am afraid to admit? What am I tired of hiding? These questions are not comfortable, but they are necessary. Because what you own, you can manage. What you repress controls you. Integrating your shadow does not mean becoming reckless or cruel. It means becoming whole. It means owning your full emotional range, setting real boundaries, and expressing yourself with clarity instead of resentment. When you stop suppressing your shadow, you begin to live with more power, more presence, and more truth. And ironically, that's when you become capable of authentic kindness, not the kind that comes from fear of rejection, but the kind that comes from a full, grounded self. Living a life centered around pleasing others inevitably leads to a state of deep inauthenticity. And this inauthenticity, though it may seem harmless at first, carries consequences that quietly but steadily erode your mental and emotional well-being. When you consistently prioritize being agreeable over being honest, when you shape your personality around the desires and expectations of others instead of your own truth, you disconnect from your inner self. That disconnection is not simply a matter of losing touch with your preferences. It is a slow departure from your own soul. To live inauthentically is to be in a constant state of inner conflict. There is the version of you that is being projected to the world, polished, filtered, and curated to make others comfortable. And then there is the real you, unfiltered, spontaneous, complex. These two versions rarely align when your main motivation is external validation. Every time you go along with something you disagree with, every time you laugh at a joke that offends you just to avoid awkwardness, every time you bite your tongue to avoid standing out, you are sending a message to yourself: my truth is less important than their comfort. These small betrayals of self may seem insignificant in the moment, but over time they accumulate. You begin to feel a vague but persistent sense of restlessness. You may feel anxious without knowing why, tired even after a full night's sleep, numb during moments that should move you. These are not random moods, they are signals. Your inner life is telling you that something is off, that the outer life you've built does not reflect your inner world. Inauthenticity requires a constant performance. And performing is exhausting. It demands that you monitor not only your behavior but also others' reactions. You become hyper-aware of how you are being perceived, adjusting, editing, recalibrating yourself based on subtle feedback. This creates chronic tension in your nervous system. You're always on, always vigilant. Over time, this pressure creates a kind of psychological burnout. You may become irritable, detached, or even depressed, not because your life is necessarily bad, but because it no longer feels like it belongs to you. When you live to please others, you may gain acceptance, but it is conditional. You are accepted not for who you are, but for the role you are playing, and somewhere deep inside you know this. So even when people compliment you, even when you're told you're a good person, or so easy to be around, the praise doesn't land. It doesn't nourish you because you know it was the mask, not your true face, that earned it. This is why chronic people, pleasers, often feel a sense of hollowness. Their lives might look full on the outside, friends, relationships, achievements, but inside there is a quiet void. The real self is still waiting, still hoping to be heard, still aching to be seen. And the longer this disconnection persists, the more severe the consequences become. Emotional numbness, loss of purpose, dissociation, even physical symptoms, fatigue, headaches, immune issues, can arise when the mind and body are not aligned with truth. But healing begins the moment you start choosing honesty over harmony. The moment you begin asking yourself, what do I really want? And allow yourself to act on the answer, even if it's uncomfortable, even if it disappoints someone else. You begin to reconnect with your authenticity. The path back is not easy. It involves unlearning habits built over a lifetime. It involves confronting fears of rejection, criticism, and conflict. But the reward is profound, a sense of peace, clarity, and power that can only come from being true to yourself. Authenticity is not about being perfect or always getting it right. It's about being real, and only when you are real can your life feel real. Only then can joy truly reach you. The more you devote your energy to pleasing others, the more your identity begins to fragment. This fragmentation is not loud or dramatic at first. It begins in subtle ways. A small compromise here, a silent agreement there. You say yes when you mean no. You agree to things that go against your values. You adopt the preferences, opinions, and desires of others to maintain harmony, approval, or connection. And at first, it seems harmless, an act of kindness, a gesture of flexibility. But over time, something inside you starts to slip away. You become divided. Different versions of yourself begin to emerge in different environments. Around your friends, you might act more laid back than you truly are. At work, you become the overly dependable one who never disagrees. With your family, you play the peacekeeper, never rocking the boat. And in your romantic relationships, you become who you believe your partner wants. Each role is crafted with care, designed to meet expectations and avoid rejection. The cost of this is immense. With each role you perform, you move further away from your true self. You start to lose a sense of your own voice, your true feelings, your preferences, your values. You become unsure of what you genuinely enjoy or dislike. You question whether your dreams are really yours or borrowed from someone else's idea of success. You may find yourself agreeing with someone in conversation, only to walk away feeling unsettled, wondering why you didn't speak your truth. This fragmentation creates confusion and inner chaos. Your mind begins to lose its center of gravity. You become a chameleon, able to blend into any environment, but never at home in any of them. There's no consistent thread that ties all your identities together. And because of this, your sense of self weakens. You may begin to feel hollow or directionless. You are surrounded by people, yet feel deeply alone, not because others don't care, but because no one really sees you. How could they? You've never shown them. This disconnection can lead to feelings of anxiety, depression, or emotional numbness. Your internal compass becomes unreliable because you've spent so long ignoring it. You start looking to others to tell you who you are and what you should want. And the more you do this, the more dependent you become on external feedback. Your self-worth rises and falls based on how others perceive you. A compliment lifts you, a criticism crushes you. This is not confidence, it is fragility masked as likability. Eventually, the weight of all these identities becomes too heavy. You may begin to resent the people you once tried so hard to please, not because they've done something wrong, but because you feel trapped in a version of yourself that you created for them. It's not their prison, it's yours. And you're the only one who holds the key. Reclaiming your selfhood begins with the courageous act of self-inquiry. You must start asking, who am I when no one is watching? What do I want when I stop asking for permission? What do I feel when I stop filtering myself? These questions are not easy, because the answers might contradict the life you've built. But the only way to become whole again is to gather those lost fragments and return them to yourself. You will have to disappoint people. You will have to say no. You will have to allow discomfort, even conflict. But in doing so, you will begin to feel the ground beneath your feet again. You will remember what it feels like to be fully alive, fully present, and fully you. And in time, the people who truly see and value your real self will emerge, because you finally gave them something real to connect to. One of the most insidious consequences of people pleasing is the erosion of personal boundaries. When your life is built around gaining approval or avoiding conflict, your ability to assert your needs becomes compromised. You learn to tolerate more than you should. You say yes when you want to say no. And you convince yourself that it's noble or selfless to put others first. But over time, this behavior doesn't just leave you tired. It leaves you powerless. Healthy boundaries are not walls that shut people out. They are the lines that define where you end and others begin. They are how you protect your time, energy, and emotional well-being. But when you're constantly trying to be liked, accepted, or needed, you start to let others cross those lines. You become afraid to say no because you fear rejection. You hesitate to express your truth because you don't want to seem difficult. You go along with plans, decisions, or behaviors that don't sit right with you, all in the name of being easygoing. The result is a life where you are constantly overextended and emotionally depleted. You begin to feel used, unappreciated, or invisible, not because others are necessarily malicious, but because you never taught them how to treat you. You trained them, through your silence and compliance, to believe that you're always available, always accommodating, always agreeable. And then you quietly suffer the consequences. This erosion of boundaries doesn't just affect your relationships with others. It affects your relationship with yourself. You begin to doubt your own feelings and instincts. You may think, maybe I should be okay with this, or I'm just being sensitive, or it's easier to just go along with it. This self-doubt is not humility. It is the result of conditioning yourself to put your needs last. And the more you do it, the more foreign the concept of self-respect becomes. People often think that setting boundaries is about pushing people away or being harsh, but in reality, it's about clarity and honesty. It's about standing in your truth and saying, this is what I'm comfortable with, or this doesn't work for me, or I need time for myself. It's not selfish, it's self-responsible. When you don't draw these lines, resentment builds. You start to feel angry at people for taking advantage of you, but that anger is often misplaced. The truth is, you are angry at yourself for allowing it. Restoring your boundaries is an act of reclaiming your power. It requires you to sit with the discomfort of letting others be disappointed. It requires you to accept that not everyone will understand or approve, and that's okay, because your life is not meant to be lived according to someone else's comfort. It is meant to be lived in alignment with your truth. You will be tested. When you begin to set boundaries where there were none, people may resist. They may accuse you of changing, of being selfish, of not caring. But this resistance is not a reason to retreat. It is a sign that your boundaries are needed, because the people who genuinely care for you will adjust. They will come to respect the lines you draw, and they may even be inspired to draw their own. And something beautiful begins to happen. You start to feel safer within yourself. You begin to trust your own voice. You realize that you are allowed to take up space, to say no without guilt, to prioritize your well-being without apology. Boundaries become not just a defense mechanism, but a declaration of self-worth. In the end, setting boundaries doesn't just protect you, it transforms you. It teaches you that your needs are valid, your time is valuable, and your presence is not something to be earned by pleasing others. It is a gift that is most powerful when it is given freely, from a place of authenticity, not obligation. When your life is built around pleasing others, you begin to internalize a dangerous belief that your worth is something you must earn. Every compliment, every nod of approval, every sign of acceptance becomes a small deposit in a fragile emotional bank account that you are constantly working to keep full. But here's the truth: when your sense of self-worth is dependent on the validation of others, you are never truly free. You are forever trapped in a cycle of performing, proving, and pleasing. And no matter how much approval you gain, it is never enough, because the root of the problem isn't how others see you. It's that you don't see yourself. At the heart of people pleasing is a deep fear, the fear of not being enough, not smart enough, not kind enough, not beautiful, successful, selfless, or agreeable enough. And because you carry this fear, you believe that if you can just make everyone around you happy, if you can avoid criticism, make others proud, never be a burden, then you will finally feel worthy. But this is an illusion. No amount of external validation can fill the void that comes from abandoning your true self. You begin to develop what psychologists call conditional self-worth. This means you only feel valuable when certain conditions are met, when you're praised, when you're liked, when you're helpful, when you don't upset anyone. This kind of self-worth is inherently unstable. It rises and falls with every opinion, every reaction, every interaction. You become hyper-attuned to others, constantly checking their moods, their tone of voice, their body language, anything to reassure yourself that you're still in their good graces. And when that reassurance isn't there, the anxiety sets in. You may begin to question yourself relentlessly. Did I say something wrong? Do they still like me? Should I have done more? You replay conversations in your head, analyzing every word. You may even apologize for things you didn't do just to smooth things over. But the truth is, this behavior doesn't come from kindness. It comes from fear, fear of disconnection, fear of disapproval, fear of being deemed unworthy. Over time, this way of living creates a profound sense of inner emptiness, because even when others love you, you don't believe them. Deep down, you know they're loving the version of you that you've carefully crafted for them, not the messy, flawed, authentic you. So their love can't fully reach you, and that's what makes it so painful. You could be surrounded by love and still feel utterly alone. The only way out of this trap is to begin cultivating self-worth from within. This means learning to value yourself not for what you do for others, but for who you are. It means honoring your own needs, feelings, and desires even when others don't approve. It means accepting your imperfections and understanding that you don't need to be perfect to be lovable. This journey begins with self-awareness. Start by noticing how often you edit yourself to be more likable, how often you say yes when your body screams no, how often you silence your truth to avoid discomfort. Then gently challenge those habits. Give yourself permission to take up space. Practice saying no without explanation. Allow yourself to be misunderstood. These small acts are radical when you've spent a lifetime tying your worth to other people's opinions. And in doing this, you begin to build a new foundation for your life, one that is rooted in your own truth, not the shifting sands of external approval. You begin to realize that your worth is not a currency to be earned. It is your birthright. You are enough, not because others say so, but because you exist, because you feel, because you are. When you stop living for the applause of others, you begin to hear something far more powerful, the quiet, steady rhythm of your own heart. And in that sound, you find a peace that no amount of pleasing could ever give you.